from lesson 1, there will be 5. That's equations. 2 is 2. And those are, and I don't know if I said that to you the other day because I've got the test made out now. It is 2 problems, but it's like 4 or 5 questions in each problem so that each answer is only like 1 point. And then lesson 3 is 3. I think that's angle addition or segment. I think that's the segment addition ones. And then lesson 4 is 2. That's probably angle addition. Lesson 5 is 3. Is that the constructions? Okay, that's segment constructions. We're not doing angle construction. You one of each is what I put on there. And then lesson 6 is 5, and that's angle pairs, parallel lines, and transversals. Corresponding, remember, are in the same position, so corresponding angles are congruent, which simply means their measures are the same. And then alternate interior angles. Now let's look at those. Alternate interior, and really if you look at them based on the idea of acute and obtuse, you're going to see it. Alternate interior, remember, are between the lines, and they are across the transversal. Here's my transversal, and they are going to be congruent. See, they're both the acute angle. We love these. So nice. Alternate exterior angles, again, outside, that would be 2 and 8 and 1 and 7. See how those are the 2 obtuse ones, and those are the 2 acute ones, and they're congruent. Now, let's look at, and we don't use that same side terminology. I'll say they're on the same side, but we don't usually use that in our note. We don't call them that. We call them consecutive interior. Now, 3 and 6 are on the same side and between the parallel lines. Now, obviously, they are not congruent. One of them is acute and one of them is obtuse. But what we find out is they end up being supplementary. They're not a linear pair because they do not have the same vertex. They're not at that straight line, like 1 and 2. See, 1 and 2 are a linear pair. But in this case, 3 and 6 are not attached to each other, but they do add up to, oh, I didn't even ask you, what is supplementary? They add up to, supplementary, 180 degrees. And then consecutive exterior is going to do the same thing. That's like 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. And you see that you've got 1 acute and 1 obtuse, and they're supplementary. Now, if we had a highlighter, but we don't necessarily need it, they did it in dark letters. Don't forget about vertical angles. We forget them, and don't forget about linear pair. And those do show up in lesson 10 if you haven't done that one yet. All your choices are listed at the top of lesson 10. Now, they tell me that angle 1 is 65 degrees. Ask me what angle 2 is. Now, what's the relationship of angle 1 and angle 2? They are now think about it. Look up here. Linear pair. Be sure and put linear pair. And so, how would we find angle 2? What do we know about those two? What do we know about with a linear pair? They add up to 180. So 180 minus 65 is 115 degrees. What about angle 3? Now, you got a couple of choices on it. I know which one I would use. I'm going to refer it back to angle 1 because they're both about the same. If I use the angle 1 relationship, do you notice that they're vertical angles? And that would make angle 3 65. Or if I use the linear pair, so you could have said a linear pair there because 2 and 3 are a linear pair and they would add up to 180. Now, what about angle 4? 4, let me give you a hint. What's the relationship of 2 and 4? So it's going to be 115, and I'm just going to do ditto marks, if that's okay with you. Now we get into our new relationships. That's the ones up here. Angle 5. How is angle 1 and angle 5 related? What is it when they're in the same position? Corresponding angles, and it would be 65 degrees. I mean, you can see that it's that acute one. So you can kind of get the numbers. The hardest part's knowing what they are. Now, I can do all of these corresponding matching up to these up here. So I'm just going to put ditto marks all the way down. And I've got angle 6, so it's going to match up with 2. Angle 7 is going to match up with 3. And angle 8 is going to match up corresponding with angle 4. Number 1. Okay, now I think on the classwork I did not ask you to name these, but I am going to ask you to name them in your notes. And if you do name them, it's just good practice for you. And I will check them if you do it that way for me. Now I'm going to label the parallel a couple of different ways that you'll see. I'm just going to use 2 lines. Those are just the arithmetic problems, and I don't know if I gave you any arithmetic ones or not, and I want to do the algebra ones. So we're going to do, well, I'll show those parallel in just a second. I'm going to do those as my parallel lines. Now, do you remember when we did lesson 10, parallel lines can be shown with those little arrows, not these arrows, but the other little arrows. And sometimes you remember we talked about doing them like this. I mean, you could just put arrows. I'll show you a couple different ways that I do it. You don't necessarily have to do it that way, but just as long as you show that they're parallel. It's just not very much to scale, because 92 is going to be a little bit more. It's an obtuse one. It's a little bit more than 90, but that's a little bit bigger obtuse, but it's okay. And tell me which pair of angles they are. Use something here. I'm going to do it like this. The first thing, and I think yesterday's class I may have given them a hint, and I said, look where they are. So you could go ahead and write the interior down. And then if it's interior, it can only be one of 2 things. They can be on the same side, consecutive, or they can be alternating, you know, one on one side, one on the other. We have to know that because what's the arithmetic here? What did we know about consecutive interior? What did we say on our cutout on page 28? Consecutive interior or what? Supplementary. So x plus 92 equals 180. Now, when you subtract the 92, I believe you get 88. Number 2. Let's draw another one. And while I'm drawing, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to do my transversal this way this time. And I don't necessarily draw them to scale. I just kind of draw one. Now this time I'm going to mark mine with 2 arrows. And sometimes I fill them in like that. And sometimes I just do them like this. Let's put 80 degrees right here. And let's put 25x plus 5. And the book usually writes them, or the worksheets I use, usually write them like that. So you could put degrees on x. You don't have to, because it's kind of actually already got the degrees on it. Now, what kind are these? Alternate interior angles. Okay? And then, what do we know about them? These 2, when lines are parallel, are always going to be the same. So I've got 25x plus 5 equals 80. Subtract your 5. 25x equals 75. Divide by the 25, x equals 3. And all your variables should come out even. This 2-line parallel again. And I'm going to draw my transversal like this. Okay, and I'll throw a little bit of a curveball at you. Not too bad. Okay, and they usually do it like that. Okay, what relationship are they? Linear pair. What do we know about a linear pair? They add up to 180 because we defined them as being supplementary, didn't we? So we've got 9x plus 6 plus 20x is equal to 180. I'm going to go ahead and do that where I'm going to put my like terms together. I just like to do that. 29x plus 6 equals 180. Subtract your 6. 29x, I'm sure I'm ahead of you, but I'll let you catch up. And I think it comes out exactly 6.